Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and my guest today is Dr. Eric Karlstrom, a former professor of geography at California State University. The world is clearly facing an environmental crisis. Some of the problems of pollution and resource depletion are so serious that they risk the extinction of entire species and perhaps even all life on Earth. More than any other risk, however, the danger posed by global warming, now known as climate change, looms largest over the planet. The causes of climate change are hotly debated, but the dominant view today is that human activity, and specifically the burning of fossil fuels and associated discharge of carbon dioxide into the Earth's atmosphere, is by far the most significant. As a result, massive programs designed to permanently change our society, economy, lifestyle, and the way we interact with nature are being implemented. These aim to drastically cut our energy use, material standard of living, and ultimately, the human population. But what if our understanding of the causes of climate change is flawed? Is it possible that the shifts in weather activity we are witnessing are simply part of a much larger picture? One in which the Earth's climate is forever changing and evolving over millions, even billions of years. We undoubtedly need to use less energy, to clean up the environment and conserve the valuable natural resources without which we cannot survive, but we must do so in the right way and for the right reasons. Following years of research and with highly specialised knowledge, Dr. Karlstrom has concluded that the issue of climate change has been dangerously corrupted and that it is being exploited to serve nefarious political, economic and social agendas. Hello and welcome, Eric Karlstrom, and thank you very much for joining us today on LegalizeFreedom.com.
Well, good morning, Greg. Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm coming to you from Crestone, Colorado. Our topic, I believe, is global warming, and the temperature when I got up this morning was about minus 12 degrees Fahrenheit. I'd have to look at a conversion chart, but it's pretty cold.
Yeah, it's pretty cold here too, actually. Now, just to start off, one thing I'm going to say about myself personally is I don't believe anything. I either know it or I don't know it. And when it comes to the controversial questions surrounding global warming or climate change, as we now have to call it, there's a lot of unknowns out there, but I certainly don't believe anything about it. Now, in your work, you have demonstrated with your facts and figures and work you've been doing for a long time now, that you're happy that you've established that the man-made global warming stroke climate change phenomenon is actually a fraud. Now, this is a very emotional issue. People get very passionate about it. It's very divisive. It's controversial, and people doing work like you are, and even people who haven't done any of the research but who are skeptical about it, they are now labelled deniers. And I should say that questioning this issue, the issue of man-made global warming, is not insisting on business as usual. You know, I'm sure you would agree there are some very real environmental problems out there that need to be addressed urgently. But nonetheless, that being said, the Earth has been cooling since around 1998, and global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it, is driven much more likely by the sun, by ocean temperatures, even by cosmic rays. So perhaps you can set out just the big picture of the work you've been doing in this area.
Yeah, well, you did a nice job of laying out the issues, Greg. I just retired from 30 years of being a geography professor at 3 universities, and my topic was physical geography, and I got my PhD in Calgary, Alberta, so there were lots of Brits there, and most Brits, I think, are fairly well educated in geography, and they probably know that physical geography includes geomorphology, climatology, soils, and biogeography. And my particular areas of research have been in geomorphology or landscape evolution, soils, and climate change. I got my PhD in 1981 from the University of Calgary. My topic was the glacial history of Glacier National Park and Waterton National Parks, right along the border between Canada and the United States. I got my master's degree from the University of Wyoming in 1977, and the topic there was geoarchaeology of the Laddie Creek archaeological site in the Bighorn Mountains in northern Wyoming. And what I was trying to do in that one was to help the archaeologists figure out the environmental changes that had been occurring during the time of human occupation, which there went back about 7,000 or 8,000 years. So always I have worked on trying to discern patterns of environmental and climate change from looking at the landscape, looking at geomorphology, looking at soils, in glacial environments, in stream environments, etc. So as a physical geographer, I've always been on the earth science side of geography. Half the articles I've published in journals were in geology journals, and half the conferences that I've gone to over the years are in geology conferences. So I'm on the borderline between geography and geology. Both disciplines sometimes claim soils and geomorphology in particular. And so when I saw back in the 1980s, when I was just starting out as a professor at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona, when I saw this issue coming down the train tracks like a huge train, I thought it was fine that the government was throwing extra money at climate research. In fact, back in the 70s, perhaps I don't know how old you are, but you might not recall. But the big scare in the mid 70s was there was a cooling trend, about a 30-year cooling trend, and therefore the press got a hold of that and said, "Look out, we're going into another ice age."
Yes, I do remember that actually. I remember that clearly because I don't like the heat, and I was quite looking forward to an ice age.
Yeah, so the fickle press, had us all scared about that, or tried to get us all scared about that, and then within about 5 years, when about 1977, it started warming up a bit, and pretty soon they almost didn't miss a beat. They just went into trying to figure out how to use this climate change issue as a way to galvanize political support for political agendas, which of course ultimately have to do with our economy, because 85% of the energy that we get in the United States and worldwide comes from fossil fuels. And of course, fossil fuels are carbon-based, and when you burn them, coal, gas, and oil, when you burn them, carbon dioxide is produced. So I remember my first climatology class, it was probably mid-70s at Flagstaff at Northern Arizona University, and even then the issue of carbon dioxide was out there, and we were taught kind of the standard storyline, which I now disbelieve, the standard storyline being that carbon dioxide, which is a trace gas, 380 parts per million, or four molecules in 10,000, a very tiny percentage of the atmospheric gases. It is one of a number, about 5 or 6, what we call greenhouse gases. Water vapor is by far the most important greenhouse gas in the effect that it has. But the notion was that CO2 would trap terrestrial heat or long infrared radiation given off by the Earth, and then re-radiate that, counter-radiate it back to the Earth, and you would disobey the laws of thermodynamics. You would actually almost create new energy in the process, And I think that there's a great book out now, which I've interviewed Dr. Tim Ball in Canada, who's Canada's first PhD in climatology, educated at London. And he's written a book now called Slaying the Sky Dragon, Death of the Greenhouse Gas Theory. And I think the greenhouse gas theory is one of these things that got promoted originally through ignorance, and then it was latched onto by political interests, and then all this has become a massive propaganda brainwashing blitz, and because it suits certain political objectives, which in a nutshell, the United Nations would like to be the prototypical global government, and what better way to do it than to regulate all economic activity and tax all economic activity, which of course is based on the use of fossil fuels. And then if you really want to have control, and these Malthusian global elite people don't really want to share the planet's resources with the other 7 billion people, they really want to reduce the population. So how would you do that? Well, you control food, you control water, you control all the, and of course energy, and you control all the essentials of life, and you regulate them. So pretty soon there's not only a carbon footprint, there's a nitrogen footprint, and there's a water footprint, and everybody's got to be very concerned about sustainability, because if I eat this hamburger, that could wreck the chances of the next generation. I mean, all this is total nonsense, but this is the propaganda that our children have been hearing in the public schools.
Well, we'll come to many of these points in greater detail, but perhaps first of all we should address the point that I made sort of in my introduction, was that people questioning this then get labeled with, as deniers, but more as then people who are not concerned about the environment, that if you're questioning this theory, then that means that you necessarily drive one or more gas-guzzling vehicles, that you want the right to, have a jet ski and, fly around the world at the drop of a hat. And that's not the case. And what this ends up doing is the divisive nature of this, it pits genuinely concerned people against each other, when actually they do want the same thing, which is a clean, healthy environment for everything living on the earth.
Yeah, I think if there's an environmentalist, it's me. I mean, I spent a lot of time skiing, climbing, and hiking all over the beautiful American West, and indeed mountain ranges all over the world. And I got into geography because I was concerned about the environment, and I liked being in nature, etc. But what has happened, Greg, is that the environmental movement has been co-opted. They say green is the new red, and the United Nations attempts to regulate all human activity just right out of the Soviet Union. And what the global elite would like is to impose, well, fascism for the rich and communism for everybody else. If communism is a great way to enslave people. And this is what they want to do. They want to regulate and limit all human activity based on these so-called environmental concerns, which incidentally, we have the technology, the corporations and the military have technology that will clean up the environment. But I think it suits their purposes to, problem, reaction, solution, to create or to augment. The top polluter in the United States is the U.S. military by far. The U.S. government is the number one polluter. So the U.S. government could go a long way towards solving the problem if they just addressed it. But it's not in the game plan of the global elite to have the corporations clean up their, well, maybe that's happening a little bit. But what I'm saying is that this is all now gone beyond the level of facts to the level of ideology and propaganda and brainwashing. And I think, I don't know how much you know about mind control, but I've been looking into it in the last year, and it's a very evil subject. Free will may be at stake in the future. But right now we have this incredible propaganda blitz. A lot of it's coming from Britain, by the way, England in particular. There's a lot of divisiveness about it. But, I taught climatology for years, and in the last several years I started using books by climatologists who were very much of the opinion that I am. And so I was the Lone Ranger at the university where I taught, which is California State University, Stanislaus. Meanwhile, the biology department was going to get on the gravy train of grants and funds and whatnot, and they had a brown bag lunch series every Friday or whatever on the topic of climate change. Now, these are biologists, so they don't know anything about climate change, but they know that they can get on board if they skew their research in such a way that climate change is in the title of the project. So they, being academic opportunists, like I'm afraid so many are forced to be, they were having this series on climate change. I was never invited. The guy who taught climatology, the guy who done the research in climatology, so it'd be like the geography department having a research forum or something like that on genetics. This is a topic which has jumped out of the normal academic constraints. I read an article recently, 700 American university presidents were signed on to a certain climate change initiative that they were going to promote such and such. We did a geography professor search the year before I left, and our dean told us we should hire this English guy who had done his research in climate modeling at the University of Texas. And because he's a computer guy, he doesn't know squat about the real world. All he knows is how to input data in computers. So this becomes the new virtual reality. So all of this is virtual reality. It has nothing to do with, see, I grew up out in the field. I mean, I was out there with a pick and shovel and bringing samples back to the laboratory and you know, got my hands real dirty and got my feet cold. And this new generation is not connected to the outside world, as far as I can tell. They have a different MO. They were taught differently. What they want to do is model reality, and then they start to believe that their models are reality. And they often are very, well, all the models are wrong in terms of, they've all been proven wrong. All of them predicted, as you said, it's been cooling since 1998 very slightly. All of them predicted warming. You have all these very, very high-tech climate models which different organizations have put forward with supercomputers. And, you know, that's, okay, fun and games. You know, they're trying to figure out how the climate system works. And by the way, it's infinitely complex, and we haven't gotten there yet. We can't make a deterministic model of what the climate's going to do. We can't predict the weather for more than a week or 10 days at the most, because weather is basically chaotic. And so, of course, climate is just average weather. So to think that we can predict long-term climate changes when we can't predict short-term changes in the weather is I'm afraid to say it, is lunacy. So what we've done is, now there have been times in the past when science, different scientific fields have been co-opted by political agendas and corrupted. And this is what I believe has happened and is happening to the small field of climatology.
Well, as well as people being excluded from discussions and debates, a lot of so-called debate that takes place in the mainstream media is very frustrating for lay people trying to get a handle on this, because quite often there is no debate. There's a lot of arguing, a lot of condemnation, name-calling, mudslinging, and at the end of the day, a lot of the basic questions about this are actually left unanswered. If you listen to a discussion on climate change, on, you know, say for example on the BBC, you get one person flatly denying that you know, a significant proportion of climate change is due to human activity. You'll get another person on the other side of the coin who puts completely the opposite side of the opinion. They both have data apparently to back up what they're saying, and at the end, and after a bit more squabbling, it's left hanging in the air. So I think, you know, a lot of people are looking for the answers. They do want to know what the truth is, but they're getting conflicting messages coming from everyone. It's not helped by the fact that it's such an emotional thing that people can't just look at the hard facts and try and discern one from the other.